Welcome to Chapter 11. This video is going to be fun since I'll be introducing a concept I call the Squircle of Fifths. Now I know we have 12 videos that came before this one going in depth about a lot of Squircle topics, but I want this video in particular to not require much prior knowledge from the viewer about squircular trigonometry and what have you. Now, without further ado, let's begin. Let's start with what the Squircle of Fifths is based on, the circle of fifths. For those of you not in the loop, the circle of fifths is a tool used in music theory to visualize relationships between keys. Just as there are 12 pitch classes in Western music, there are 12 pitches labeled here, and as we move by nodes clockwise, each subsequent pitch is a fifth higher than the last, hence the name Circle of Fifths. Now, I know that this is just a way of visualizing the abstract idea of the pitches coming back around to the same class after a full rotation, but what if it wasn't so abstract? What if, between every node, the circle contained other pitches? Between the C and G is an E, there's another C before the D here as well, and there's pitches between all of those pitches, and thus the circle of fifths is a continuous figure. We can think of this as a point traveling along the circle, and as the length of its path accumulates, so does the pitch of the point. Since every point on the circle of fifths is evenly spaced, we can associate a change in arc length of pi/6 to a change in the pitch of a fifth, or 7 semitones. So the arc length from 0 to some angle theta over pi/6 length units times 7 semitones is the pitch of the point lying on the circle of fifths and angle theta away from whatever pitch gets class 0. The Squircle of Fifths is applying this concept of a continuous circle of fifths to unit squircles, simply taking arc base 2 and turning it into arc base p to measure the arc length of any squircle. We can take this definition of the change in pitch based on the angle and visualize it. Since this function is a scaled arc base p, it only increases, but it will be more useful for us if we keep the output between 0 and 12 semitones, so it's easier for us to identify where it is in a scale. So what we'll do is take delta p mod 12, so that every change in pitch is brought within the same octave. And using this, we can now show some squircles of fifths, each with 12 notes separated by an angle of pi/6. To be consistent with the circle of fifths, I'm treating the top note as C, which equals 0. But what about the other notes? I could just label them like usual, C, G, D, and so on. But if I were to take P sub 2.5, for example, and sort the values on its Squircle of Fifths from least to greatest, you can see that the mapping of the resulted ordered scale does not make the interval between each note a fifth. We're going to take the values in the Squircle and just put them in order, labeling each pitch with their note name in that order, then reassociate that with their positions on the Squircle of Fifths. This reassociation results in a rotation that's not necessarily always a fifth. But I will not go about calling this the Squircle of various intervals, because this is still based on a fifth being accumulated over an arc length of pi/6. And going back to the assorted p mod 12s, I can now show their Squircles of fifths with the pitches labeled. But let's go back to that little timeline picture from the Squircle of Fifths animation. This shows how many semitones and cents each note in the Squircle scale is from C. And thus, we have an infinite amount of new 12-tone microtonal scales. This was probably a lot of information in a short time, so let me know if you have any questions or ideas in the comments. And within the comments, I'll put a graph with that Squircle of Fifths animation and a graph that will let you create simple musical sequences with the scales. I plan for the next video to also be about Squircle scales, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye!